Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, Today the Hungry Gamer is back with another mini review, and today we're talking about Dragons Down from Mayfair Games / Mr. B Games / the other one, Active Magic Games. Now, this is a game that I brought home with me from PAX. I had heard a little bit about it. I had heard people tell me that I should cover this game at some point, but I just didn't have it. And they were kind enough to say, please take a copy, we'd love for you to cover it. We have a new campaign coming up, and all of that. And this is not quite a first impressions video for me. I actually played through far more than I thought I was going to, so it's kind of a midway between first impressions and a full review. So take that for what you will. Now, what this game is this is the spiritual successor to Magic Realm. The 1970s or early 80s, huge fantasy, complicated, very long game. And part of the pitch that I heard from this was, it's very quick, it's easy to set up, and it is fast to play, and fun, obviously. So I said, okay, we're going to try this. And this is a game that is a lot about exploration. You're going to set out a variety of different environments, and the base game comes with 3, the mountains, the caves, and the forest, and you'll set out 1, 2, or 3 of those. There are some scenarios, or you can just play kind of open sandbox. Most of the time you're going to wind up playing open sandbox, and there are competitive and cooperative ways that you can play with or without PvP. And in general, you're going to be using your actions to kind of move around and explore different tiles, experience different regions, and there will be some kind of random something in each region, depending on what type of region it is. It might wind up being some kind of site where you can find good things, find treasure, it's a merchant, it might be some kind of bad guy that you're going to have to deal with, fight, or hide from, and it's every turn you're going to go somewhere, you're going to roll some dice, and it's going to tell you what it is you find. Or you're going to go somewhere, you're going to put out a random token, it's going to tell you what it is that you're going to find. And everything that you do, you're going to wind up rolling 2 dice for. Pretty much every action that you take. The dragon shows up, you don't want to be taken down by the dragon, well, you can hide. You're going to roll 2 dice. You want to explore a treasure trove and see what kind of loot you can find there, well, you're going to roll 2 dice. But the catch here is you're always going to take the worst of the 2 dice. So if you're trying to hide and 1 die says you're spotted, the other die says you're not, well, you're in trouble, you've been spotted. You're trying to get loot, you're going to roll 2 dice, and it's going to tell you how far down in the stack you're going to dig. If you roll a 2 and a 4, you're going to count down 4 cards, that's the loot that you get. The better loot's going to be on top of the stack, and so on and so on. And so each time you play, you're going to have a different race and class that you're going to put together, and each race is going to have various different art and male, female, and different skin tones and whatnot that you can have, but they're all going to have the same basic abilities, which will be kind of 1/2 of your stat block, and then you have a different class, which will have the other half of your stat block. And each of them come with kind of basic core powers you can always use, but mostly it's going to give you different color of cubes. And cubes are going to matter because that's how you're kind of doing everything really important. Because there would be no adventure here without any kind of combat going on. And the way combat works is you have a variety of different colored cubes that you have, and when you're fighting a different monster, you're going to be comparing a couple of things. The main thing, though, is the speed that you're attacking at. If one of you is attacking at a faster speed, you are automatically going to hit. But you're going to be able to put cubes out onto your player cards and then your weapons to determine how fast you're going and then how much damage you're going to do. Of course, you're going to be limited to only 5 cubes, so that's going to kind of limit what you're going to do. You're fighting something really, really fast. Well, you might put a bunch of cubes out onto the speed part, but that means you're not going to be able to do as much damage. Or maybe you're not going to be able to avoid the enemy attack. But then if you have the same speed or a lower speed than what you're attacking, same thing goes for the bad guys. You're going to have to roll the hit dice, and there's a chance that you're going to hit. There's a chance that you're only going to hit if you have at least an equal speed to your opponent, and you might just miss. And again, you're rolling 2 dice and you're taking the worst option. And that's kind of the theme of what is going on. As I mentioned, there are some scenarios that you can play, but in general, you're kind of going to be just kind of exploring this realm, doing things and trying to become a legend. You're going to be getting legend points, you're going to be getting fame points, you're actually going to be able to kind of trade in those fame points from our legend points as you go, and you can even just retire mid-game. And then you can just retire. Be like, you know what, this one's not working for me. I retire, here's my legend points. I'm going to start a brand new character, roll it out, and see if I can make everything up as I go. However, the same type of thing happens if you die. If you die, well, you're going to lose some of your fame, but still, you're going to turn it into legend points, and you can die and still win the game. It's rather interesting how that works, but at its core, this is what you're doing. You're playing the sandbox, trying to hit a set number of points within 30 turns. Or if you're playing competitive, whoever has the most legend points, the most fame, after 30 turns. And that's kind of the broad overview of how this game works. So what do I like about this game? The first thing is this game has a real zero to hero vibe. When you start out, it doesn't feel like you are incompetent. Like, you can do lots of stuff, but as you go through, as you find more gear, then suddenly you start to feel more powerful. And the last game that I played, I was able to kind of just stroll on through and just lay waste to everything. Like, I was getting attacked by multiple dragons at the end, and I was able just to kind of bat off their attacks, take a little damage, but just was laying waste. And I really felt very powerful by the end. And that's always really fun, especially when you play a solo game, which you're knocking out in about an hour. Really, really cool. The next thing I want to say is, once you have organized the game and you've put the various bad guy chips in the right little trays and put the different tiles in the right little trays, it's actually a very quick to set up game. Once you're organized. Before you're organized, it's kind of a mishmash, it's kind of a mess. Once you're organized, it gets out really quick, and it puts away fairly quick as well. So I always appreciate that. I also appreciate that the classes all feel really different. The race is a little less so, and that's not because they're all the same within each individual race. I'm fine with that, but they just don't do a lot different. There's 1 cube, 2 cube difference here and there. Maybe one has a little extra health point, one doesn't, and they have different core racial powers, like the halfling's able to hide easier and things like that. But the classes feel very different, and again, there's the core ability, but just kind of the breakdown of the cubes. And this is really shows up when you mix the martial classes versus the caster classes. Because the caster classes, that's when it gets really interesting, because some of those cubes that you have and you're trying to put out onto the different places, they're colored cubes which align with specific spells. So you can only use those on specific spells. And spells aren't easy to come by most of the time. Sometimes they're easy to come by. Sometimes you're able to find spell books and get a whole bunch of them, but sometimes you won't see another spell the entire game. So the spellcasters become very, very different and can be quite challenging, which also kind of adds a nice little difficulty curve as you think about, so, well, I wanted an easier game, so I'm just going to play the warrior. Or, you know, I want something a little bit harder. I'm going to play the sorcerer. And it's really interesting how that works, and I really like that. I also like the kind of infinite exploration. Yes, everything's kind of the same as you're flipping over different tiles, but it always feels different because you're going to go out searching for things and you never know exactly where the thing that you want's going to be. You have to find it, but as you're doing it, always feels like you're exploring somewhere new because there's constant danger. Every turn you're rolling those dice and things are showing up on different tiles, or maybe they don't, but there's constant danger and it feels like you're out in the wilderness finding new things. And I really do appreciate the way that works, with a board that's pretty much the same every single time. The next thing I'll say is I like the uniqueness of the combat. I mean, time will tell if I get tired of it eventually, but it's a clever little system, and it's a system that leans more towards determinative than not, because for the most part, yes, the bad guys are going to flip over one side or other depending on which tactic they're going to use, and that will change their stats a little bit, but for the most part, you know if you're going to be able to beat these monsters or you're gonna get wailed on. Yes, you have armor that might be able to protect you and so on, but usually you know if you can win or not. And that's really interesting. There's a really interesting little puzzle that goes along with that of how you're going to do combat, how you're going to deal with combat, when are you going to hide, when are you going to have specific gear you have set so you can do an ambush, and so on and so on and so on. And I do think that's very, very clever. The last thing that sticks out, something I enjoy, is the way that for pretty much the first half of the game, maybe a little more, it's all good. Sure, you know what? I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to try to find a treasure trove and dig into it and get some stuff. But then that last half, that last third of the game, suddenly you're like, oh, I really have to get to this score. I have to find a way to do that. Okay, I can go to the knights, and the knights are going to give me 2 legend points if I can kill 2 things of 10 fame or higher. Okay, where can I find those? Okay, I gotta go find those. Or I have this quest to kill treants. Okay, they're in the forest, but they're only going to show up at random at this one tile in the forest. So I have to get myself there and then make noise to try to see if I can roll what I need to get them to show up. It's really, really interesting how you feel like, this is great. And, oh my god, I have to do this. It really adds, in a relatively short game, a lovely bit of tension. So what are my quibbles with the game? I have 2 big ones. The first one is it uses AI art. If you are familiar with me, you know that I don't like AI art. In fact, I usually turn games down that have AI art. In this instance, I just didn't know. I didn't ask. It would have been really unfair and unprofessional of me to be like, you know what? Oh, this has AI art. I didn't realize that. I took your copy of this game. I'm not going to cover it. That would not be fair. So I say it here to say, I'm not sure exactly what the level of AI art is. There are artists listed in the credits of the game, and I actually sent some questions in, but due to the holidays, I didn't get answers back as quickly as I would like. My suspicion is that either the character art or the board art, one of those two were either AI generated or AI touched up, because there is a separation there. And so one, in general, I don't approve of AI art, and I do not know if in the reprint that is coming, they're moving to all human artists or they're staying with what they're doing. I don't know. A lot of people don't care about that, and you may be one of them. A lot of people tell me, why do you care? In 3 years, it's not going to matter, and that may be true, but for now, it's something that I don't really like. So understand that that is a thing there, but more so, I think the art's a little bit disjointed from some of the card art and the characters and the board. It's a little bit disjointed, I think, and not super exciting. But the bigger one to me is the rulebook. The rulebook is very hard. I really, really struggled with the rulebook to understand what is going on, how things got placed out, and I actually finally had to watch a couple of videos. One, there's a lovely video that shows setup by the designer of the game. That helped a lot. There's a couple other people that have playthroughs. I had to watch those to figure a lot of things out, and that made my first game really slow and really long because I struggled with that. Now, my understanding is in the new campaign, it's going to be an updated rulebook that should kind of fix a lot of that, but the rules are hard. So if you're excited about this, you're going to be watching some videos unless there's a new rulebook, which I think there's going to be. Now, moving a bit away from what is maybe my personal preferences regarding AI and then how I read rulebooks, one of the things that you should know is that this is kind of a paper, rock, scissors vibe, almost, in the sense that sometimes you just go and get whooped. If you are slow and your character is just slow, well, some things are going to be able to get these hits on you right away, and there's going to be times when you feel like you're just going to die, which my understanding is very true to Magic Realm, which is what it's kind of based on. This is a spiritual successor to, but that is something that might bother you. The next thing I'm going to say is the dice can be very punishing. Every turn you're rolling those dice to see if something comes out, and there's a playthrough that I was actually watching where it was every single turn something was coming out, multiple things, and he just couldn't get away. And I had that experience for about 3 or 4 turns in a row once. But other times, nothing comes out for several rounds, and you have this breath of fresh air. And that's kind of part of the excitement, I think, of the game, but it is swingy, and those dice can be punishing, especially because you're always taking the worst result. So just something to keep in mind, it is a swingy game and kind of leans toward more punishing than forgiving. I mentioned earlier on that the magic classes to me seem like they're a little bit more challenging to play, and that's just something to kind of keep in mind and understand. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but you know, it can be a little bit harder if you're playing a magic class. And then the last thing I'm going to say is the core gameplay is you're going to play 30 rounds usually. And there's no real good way to track it. Doesn't mean there's not a way, because they do have these. And as you can see, it has a space where you kind of write what happened every turn, and a space where you kind of write your little hero story. And there's interesting stuff here, especially if you're kind of leaning more into that role-playing experience. But if you're not, this is a big old pad of stuff to kind of write down when, you know what? sometimes I just want a counter that goes 1 to 30 and something else I can put on the little hidden path so I can mark I found this and move on. But again, maybe that's a little personal preference also. So there you have it, folks. That is Dragons Down, a little bit more than the first impressions. This is an interesting game, gameplay-wise. And this is a game that really, to me, feels like it's about the exploration and the adventure. It reminds me a little bit of Legends of Novus, which is a small indie game from a few years ago, one of the early games that I covered, that was kind of about moving around and finding things and discovering and kind of becoming a legend. This reminds me of that a little bit, though this has a bit more crunch, more heft, more weight, and, well, it's also harder, let's be real. But there you have it, folks. That is Dragons Down. Overall, I enjoy the gameplay here. Obviously, I have my issues when it comes to the rulebook and the AI, but that said, it's a game that I really enjoyed, and I've had a good time playing it, and I will probably play more of it, and at some point I'd love to try out some of the expansions and things that are out there, which are not things that I have. But there you have it, folks. That is Dragons Down. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.